Welcome to the Linux Spotlight. This show is dedicated to showing off the best thing about Linux, our community. This community is made up of developers, distro maintainers, podcasters, and everyday users. Each one plays a vital role in our community. And the goal is to have a discussion with each individual about their journey into Linux and beyond. So join me now as we turn the spotlight on. Hello, I'm your host, Rocco, and with me today, our special guest is Shane from Linux Lads Podcast. Shane, how are you?
I'm good. Thank you very much. Thanks for bringing me on.
Well, we've been trying to connect for, a month now? And It seems like either one of us is sick or can't make it, so it is really good to have you on, brother.
Thank you very much. Thank you.
All right, so people will undoubtedly know you by your podcast, obviously, Linux Lads. You host that with Connor and Mike.
Right.
So they'll know your voice, even if they don't recognize your face.
Yeah.
You are also the tactical officer for the Dublin Linux community.
Yeah.
But if you were to describe yourself to somebody that didn't know you, never had met you, who would you say Shane is personally?
Oh boy. Yeah, I'm the kind of person that really hates to have to describe myself or tell anybody about myself. I kind of, yeah. But I don't know. I guess someone who just is very curious about pretty much everything. And so, yeah, I don't know. I'd like to put my hand to a lot of different things, but yeah, I don't know. As far as the description goes, I don't know. That wasn't very concise.
That's fine. What about hobbies? You got hobbies outside of Linux?
Yeah. God, too many to name. As I said, I just, I'm very fleeting when it comes to all my interests and stuff. So, I'll research one thing or I'll see a YouTube video about something about, I want to try that. I was trying out music production on Linux.
Nice.
I was, I've been toying with Blender for some time because I'm very interested in VFX and films as well in general, and cinematography, filmmaking in general. I would like to get into coding, but I just don't have the time. Just so many other things. But I don't know. Yeah, it's so hard to pin down one thing that I would say I like doing most. I think I just like making stuff.
Right. Well, are we going to see a big screen production one day of produced by Shane?
I should hope so. Yeah, that I'd love to do something like that. Even just some short film on YouTube or something, because I follow a lot of these guys on YouTube who do indie VFX and filmmaking and stuff, on a very small scale for YouTube. But it's so impressive, some of the things they do, and I just love all the problems that you solve when you're creating fantasy on a screen, basically, like all the tricks and all the ingenuity that comes into it. I think it just brings together a whole lot of different disciplines and stuff. So yeah, I think the creative side of things and the creative use of technology, that's kind of what I'm all about. Linux fits in nicely with that, because it's it allows you to kind of what's the word I'm looking for? It just gives you choice, and it removes the barriers that you'd normally have. I think I veered way off your original question, but I do that.
That's what we're here to do. So, so what is it that you do for a day job?
I work in technical support, basically. So I would just have support cases. I work for kind of a multinational tech company. I'm not going to say which one, but yeah. So yeah, I just do tech support. I speak to customers on the phone, troubleshoot issues, testing, that kind of thing.
Is this a remote tech support or what?
No, it's just like a support line. It's it's not just your bog standard call center kind of stuff. It's like the next tier above that, I would say. But yeah, I mean, it's not glamorous, but it pays the bills, and that's, I have to put my passion to some financial use.
Right. It's a more exciting job than I have, let me tell you that. So, well, you made a video on your YouTube channel about a year ago, I guess, and it was called Raspberry Pi NAS with Open Media Vault.
Yeah.
Are Pis something you're still interested in? And, have you done any projects with them lately?
Yeah, God, I remember that video. That was, I was quite proud of that video actually at the time, and I intended to do a follow-up that never actually happened. I just kind of stopped putting videos on my YouTube channel, so unfortunately we didn't get a part 2. But yeah, that was one of my highest rated videos, like, yeah, or highest viewed, I should say. But yeah, like with Raspberry Pis, I do bits and bobs. I mean, I haven't for the last few months, not really. But very recently, actually only in the last week or so, somebody posted in the Linux Lads Telegram group about a Plasma big screen. I think it was Mike, actually. And it's something from the Plasma developers or the community, maybe, I can't remember. But it's like a media center version of KDE, essentially. And it's it's intended for control with a remote. I use the HDMI CEC where you can control the device with your TV remote and stuff like that. And I was like, ooh, yes, please. And let's have a go with that. But I fired it up, and it was kind of cool to start working with Pis again, flashing the SD cards and getting all your various cables and dangling it from the back of the TV. And It was quite cool to mess with a Pi again. So yeah, I actually, funny you should mention that, because I caught the bug where Pis are concerned again, and I went to like the Pi Hut, which is a really great site for accessories, and I just bought like power supply and cases and all sorts of things, things to play with in quarantine.
Well, that's something that I have not yet got into, but at some point I am going to get into it. But yeah, it definitely opens up possibilities for specific use cases. I don't have specific use cases for my house. But we had talked about maybe making my open sign light up automatically, at a certain time for the live stream or whatever. But other than that, I don't have a whole lot of use cases. I just have not found the time to get into them yet. So definitely something I want to do.
Yeah. It's as you said, it does help to have a use case. That's kind of my biggest problem, because I mean, I could get all those electronics kits where you can attach to the GPIO pins, and you can make little LEDs light up and stuff, and you can do these little electronics projects. But I don't know, I just don't think that way. I don't want to experiment. I want to put it to use. Yep. That's how I think.
Well, everybody's story is different, and that means that local contacts are different, friends, family, whatever. Do you find that your local contacts, your family, your friends are receptive to Linux? Or is it like when I mention Linux to people around me and they just look at me like I'm crazy?
Yeah, for the most part, I mean, my family and friends would all be aware that this Linux thing is what I'm all about, and something I talk about a lot, and has a lot to do with what I do in my spare time. And yeah, I think a lot of people kind of get what it is on a very basic level. They know, I've just explained it as like, okay, when you turn on your PC and you have Windows there, I said all the background stuff, that's what this is. It's just a different type of that. So that's how I break it down. The computer, because a lot of people don't even think of that, really, do they? No. They just think of like, oh, this is just the computer, and they don't realize there's an alternative to Windows. So people just think computers have Windows on them, and that's it. And it's interesting to kind of, people are more receptive than you might think. I mean, even if they don't understand and they don't appreciate it on the same level, why it's interesting, they will still kind of be interested and go, oh, okay, so why do you do that? Like, why is this a good thing? Why should I care, basically? And yeah, I mean, it gets to a certain level, a certain point in the conversation where the eyes start to glaze over a little bit, and then you think, okay, I've lost the audience.
Well, I think that's the hardest thing, because you can start talking to somebody about Linux, and you can mention the fact that it's like similar to like what you're seeing in a Windows computer, but then to make that leap between there and why they'd want to use it, is not always the easiest thing to do. So yeah, I mean, I have, like when I say that people look at me strange, my immediate family all knows about Linux. They run Linux, but people I come in contact with at work and, friends or whatever, they're like, they don't even know what I'm talking about. All right. So before we get into your experience with Linux itself, let's go back to the beginning of your career with computers. What was the first computer that you used?
Oh yeah, I love this. When I was about, I would say 7-8 years old, my parents were like, okay, let's get one of these computer things. Let's go to the store and see what this is all about. Let's buy a computer. And I was over the moon, because at that point I had only had those little VTech laptops for kids and stuff. Up until that point, I was dying to get a real computer. So before I even touched the computer, I was all in. Yeah, so it was like a gateway PC, one of the flat horizontal desktops that you actually put the monitor on top of the computer, and it was beige, of course, and and I think it was like, I don't know, a 500 megahertz processor or something like that, 3 gigs storage, 500 megabytes of RAM if you're lucky.
Right.
And then, so this was fascinating to me. I was like, oh my God, there's so many things I can do here. And so immediately that was me. Like, I was constantly on the computer playing games. I was, messing around in the system files and everything, even at a really young age. And we actually had to replace like 2 different home computers because I had mucked around in Windows so much that it wouldn't boot anymore.
I can say that I've done that a few times.
My parents weren't even that angry, though, in fairness. Like, I think they were just glad I was curious about something.
Yep. So you obviously had a love for technology even back then. Take us through the progression of your computers then, to the point where, when do you get your first personal computer, like it's yours?
Oh yeah. So that was when I was about 15 or 16 or something. I had saved up enough money from working in this like little shop around the corner. I had a little job. I'd worked in a bar, like kind of cleaning glasses and stuff, and gotten a few quid from working in this little shop and stuff. So I had saved up a bit of money. So I was like, oh, cool. So I'm going to buy a laptop. So I was about 15 or 16, and I bought my very first laptop just for me. And it wasn't a home computer, the family computer. It was mine. So yeah, that laptop was a big deal for me. It was entirely mine now. It was no longer I didn't have to share it with anybody. So that was pretty cool. Fast forward maybe 2 or 3 years, then I had I'd left school. I think it was like 18, 19. Yeah, I'd left school, and I had been working a bit and going to college and stuff. So I was like, okay, I'm going to buy myself a proper desktop PC. I'm going to buy myself a tower. And I went to some local computer place near my house, and I was just in Candyland. I was looking through their site, and I was like researching all the build and everything. And I was like, I'm going to assemble my own PC for the very first time. Now the place actually assembled it for me, so I didn't get that until a few years after. I've assembled like 2 or 3 PCs since. I've been through a few since then, but that first one was amazing. But I didn't have a desk for it either. I always remember that. Like, I had to just perch the monitor on some really, really horrible shelf at the end of my bed and sit on the end of my bed with my keyboard and use it that way. But I was delighted.
Well, I think that building your PCs, building your own custom computers can be super exhilarating and fun and just awesome at times. And then it can be some of the most frustrating times as
Incredibly
well.
stressful as well.
Yeah, when stuff just doesn't work. So there's good and bad points about it. But so how long is it till you hear about Linux?
Well, I'd always known about Linux, I think. I don't see, this is the thing. People ask me when I first got into it, and I actually don't know. I can't remember. I just knew about it. I think I'd heard of Unix first. The first time I encountered it, I think it was like a cover disc on a magazine. I got curious and I thought, okay, what's this Linux thing? And I saw there was a cover disc and it had like Ubuntu, 11 or 12.04 or something. I don't know.
Right. Well, is that the first distro that you tried?
I think so. No, actually, yes, I remember now. It was it was like 6 different distros on one disc, and I was actually knew enough that I was able at the time that I was able to there were live images, so that's when I had to figure out the ancient art of going into your BIOS and changing your boot device. And so that was my first real exposure to it, back when Linux wasn't as mature as it is now, and especially in the user space anyway. So, it was very easy to break things then.
It was.
And things didn't work ideally most of the time. So, it was just kind of fun, like at the time. Yeah, I remember installing it going, oh, this is kind of cool. It was a bit novel to see something completely different on your screen and have completely different menus to Windows, and but I treated it as kind of a bit of a curiosity initially because I still wanted to play my RTS games on Windows.
Yep. So what about that first experience? If you were going to tell somebody about your first experience with Linux, what would you say the two biggest things were? Maybe the biggest con, the biggest pro about when you tried Linux back then?
Oh, well, the pro was really just the novelty and the excitement of using something else and thinking, wow, it sounds a bit corny, but it's like I'm making this computer my own, it's, I'm going further here. I'm going further under the surface. So yeah, I felt like, I don't know, that like old, what was it, like that old Angelina Jolie film, Hackers or something. Yeah, because I love that film. So, and Swordfish and stuff like that. So that's what I thought hackers were. So right. I thought I'm putting something different on my PC. I'm so cool. But so the pros and cons, I guess, to get back to that. So pros was that what I said. So it was different and new and novel, and it was cool and all that good stuff. But then the cons were, it just, mostly didn't work very well. And it was kind of ugly sometimes, depending on what distro, I remember the nicest looking distro was always, for me, like Mandriva or Mandrake or whatever it was called at the time.
Yep. And
then you had, Fedora didn't look too bad. Ubuntu was in its brown days, so I wasn't a fan of that.
So you didn't, I would assume you didn't stick completely with Linux then. It was more of a hobby, basically.
Oh yeah. It was really just a curiosity. I just didn't know what it was, and I wanted to try it just to see what it was. And I didn't get it at the time. I didn't get the whole backstory and why it's important and the principles behind it and everything. So
at what point or how long does it take for you to make that jump to Linux?
I think it was around, I first started like installing it, like dual booting it around 2009, 2010, perhaps. So I think I just was on Ubuntu, and then I quickly moved over to Linux Mint. I was always dual booting with Windows, because like honestly, I at the time I really liked Windows 7, and I was kind of happy with Windows 7 at the time. I think it was Windows 7. But yeah, I remember I wasn't in a super big hurry to get away from Windows 7 because I didn't mind it that much at the time. And, you know, I would play games on Steam a lot and stuff like that. So,
Yep.
yeah, I never really thought of making the jump for many years. I would dual boot into it and experiment with it and stuff and learn new things and check out new applications and things like that. Like I would switch over to it for GIMP, for example, because I was kind of curious about photo editing and image manipulation, and of course you had to pay big money for something like GIMP on Windows. So, so yeah, that's where it came in handy.
So, do you use Windows at all now?
No, I am proud to say I am. Hi, my name is Shane, and I have not used Windows for 2 years.
I love it.
Yeah, no, it's been many years since I've used Windows. Quite a few, 3, 4, I don't even know. But it's a multiple of years since I've ever had Windows installed. No, that I tell a lie. I did have Windows installed on my other hard drive up until very, very recently, up until about a month ago. And then I just said, you know, Windows 10 on that hard drive. I have all my files. It's just using a hard drive, like unnecessarily. I haven't booted into it for about 2 years. So what's the point?
Right.
So I just wiped it. Because Linux has gotten to the point where I think you can use it as your sole OS and not need Windows ever again.
I believe that to be true. I think there are certain use cases that maybe that doesn't always work out. Like for me, I play certain FPS games that are not going to run on Linux, like Call of Duty Modern Warfare. So in that case, I like to look at it like I'm not using Windows. I'm just using a tool to play Call of Duty.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah, I had that with a few Steam games, and then Proton came along, and pretty much every Steam game I would like to play works flawlessly on Linux. I haven't had a single problem. So I'm happy with that. Like GTA 5 and Doom and stuff. I really like those games, and they work flawlessly with Proton on Linux, and I don't even think they're both supported.
Right.
Doom, maybe.
Well, we have come a long way since the beginning of playing games on Linux. So yeah, we're in a good time right now where even if it doesn't say that it supports Linux, you can probably get it to run. Most likely. So, you know, you're this curious guy. Are you also a distro hopper where you test out all of these new distros and desktop environments?
I used to be, but I'm not anymore. This is the thing. I sometimes feel like a bit of an imposter on the podcast because like the likes of Connor and Mike, those guys would be trying a new distro every other week and stuff, and you know, hopping and whatnot. But I just don't do that anymore. I just don't explore as much as I used to. I'm kind of happy. I've gotten into my rhythm. I know what I want. I'm not as curious about the entire ecosystem as I used to be. But like to make up for that though, I feel like I know what I want from Linux now, and I know what I look forward to in the future. And it's like I just use it. It's just how I use my computer now. I don't even think about it that much anymore. It's become so normal for me. So yeah, I think that's, to answer your question, no, I don't distro hop at all. I try to stick with the same distro as much as I can for as long as I can, because I don't like having to completely like uproot my file system and like just move, like copy files and stuff like that. I just don't like all that tedium. So I don't back up very often, so, which I probably should.
So that begs two questions, or actually just one statement, one question. You're not odd for not wanting to distro hop, because I myself have the main machine here where I run Pop! OS, and that's what I run, and I don't touch it on the main machine. I have other machines that I can install distros on if I want, but I definitely, when I need to get work done, I need it to be there. I need it to be stable. I can't be setting stuff up all the time. So, but that begs the question, which distro and desktop environment do you run and why?
It's gonna be a fairly mainstream answer. For quite a few years, I was all in on Linux Mint. I was with Linux Mint for a few, 3 or 4 versions, I would say. So yeah, for several years, Linux Mint was my daily driver, and with Cinnamon desktop environment. So really liked it. It just worked basically. I know that's a phrase that's bandied about quite a lot in the tech world, but it just worked. And it also had the benefit at the time. This was more of a strength than it is now, but it also had a lot of proprietary drivers and proprietary media codecs and stuff pre-installed, which was a lifesaver because so many distros just didn't have that stuff. Like you'd need to download a driver to play a DVD or play an MP3 file or something like that. Or no, right. Codec, sorry, not a driver. But yeah, so nowadays that doesn't really matter. You know, most Linux distros will work the same way as any other. And hardware support is not really something you have to think about anymore. So it's quite amazing how much it's matured. So Linux Mint, yeah, then I went to Ubuntu 1904, I guess. And then recently I jumped ship to Zorn OS. So I'm using
nice.
That. Yeah.
So is it because Zorn is already set up, or what was the reason for choosing Zorn?
I just think it's it's the closest thing I can see to like a Linux end product, like a really commercial grade distro. Because like I don't want to cast shade at anyone in the community. I don't think that's the right attitude to have. But like, but some people seem to want to not have commercial grade stuff. You know, they want Linux to forever be like held together with, you know, sticky tape and lollipop sticks, and they kind of balk at the professional, nice looking Linux, you know, that's polished and looks good and functions well and you know, acts like Windows or Mac OS or something. Like some people are kind of resistant to that, I find, because they focus more on the, you know, the technical ingenuity of Linux or the efficiency of Linux and stuff, and that's what they want to preserve, which is fine. Like everyone is entitled to think whatever they like, but yeah, so I don't know. I'm not like that at all. I want Linux to be, I want it to be a proper end product. I want people to use it. I want people to enjoy using it, and I want like people who aren't normally into it to use it on a regular basis. And because I just think it's a good thing to do. I just think it's a good way to use your computer. Yeah, I just want Linux to be a polished end product, the same as like Mac OS or Windows. I want people to see it on the same pedestal as the commercial OSs. So yeah, I mean, I have no problem with Linux being fancy or polished or nice looking, or, you know, that's what I want. I want it to not be in my way. I want it to work really stably, and I want it to look very nice, and, you know, I want to take advantage of the cool computer that I have. So why wouldn't I want it to look nice?
Well, there's a whole gamut of different, I'm not going to say opinions, but that's, for lack of a better word, there's a whole gamut of opinions on, you know, some people don't care what it looks like. Some people just want to use it. Some people want the speed, so they'll sacrifice what it looks like. Some people just want it to look nice. So, I mean, I think that we have so much choice in the Linux world right now that I think everybody can be satisfied with something. Like there's pretty much a distro out there for anybody out there and how they view things. Yeah, exactly. All right. Let's talk about your YouTube channel here for a second. I know it's not been active lately, but I did want to ask you if you had any plans on reviving it.
I guess, yes, maybe. I thought about it. I just can't think of any videos to do. It's ideas. I just don't have them. And but now that we're all kind of staying in our homes for the foreseeable future, I thought maybe this is a good time to think about it again and make some videos. Could be a good way to connect with people outside the house, and, you know, because we all kind of still need a bit of social interaction. So it could be a good way to, you know, please show off your projects or whatever you're working on, or just make a tutorial on something. I don't know. I'll figure it out. But Yes, to answer your question, yes, absolutely. I really do want to get it going again. I just found making YouTube videos was quite time consuming. I don't know if you've found that. Maybe you've gotten into a workflow that it's not doesn't take as long. But for me, yeah, I just found I would spend hours on it. I would spend hours and hours editing, and it would take me like 6-7 hours work all together to produce one video. So that was basically all my spare time after work, a couple of nights a week, and then maybe a bit of time on the weekend. So if I wanted to pump out like a video a week or even every 2 weeks, that was kind of a big commitment in terms of time. So but now that I have all the time in the world, like I did enjoy it though. That said, I mean, I don't want to complain. It was really fun to make videos. It's really like YouTube is a great platform for like videos. They kind of pull in all sorts of different disciplines, and you kind of have to learn about a lot of different things to publish videos. So I just find it so interesting, the whole process, and trying to do that entirely on Linux is really interesting as well.
It is something that you need to enjoy doing if you're going to do it, because it is super time consuming. I mean, you mentioned about 7 hours, and I'm going to say that usually a Linux Spotlight episode from scheduling it, recording it, editing it, and everything all the way down the line is probably a 10-hour process, maybe 12-hour process for each episode. So yeah, it does get time consuming. It's totally worth it when the finished product is out there, yeah. but you have to be able to make that commitment. If you can't, it's not going to be worth it. So your username for your YouTube channel, and I also think it's for your Telegram name, is Stranded Output. And I love hearing backstories on how people chose their names. So where did Stranded Output come from?
So the name, it was pretty intentional. It's basically a play on words with standard output, like in programming terms. I just thought it was something that sounded clever. But there is actually kind of a meaning behind it. Yeah, that like basically what Stranded Output is, the concept is, as I said, I'm someone who's into so many different things that I can't really specialize or become an expert in any one thing. So that's what I call stranded output, like basically just outputting stuff that's just stranded in its own little bubble, and you're outputting videos or, some crappy music you made, or I don't know. There's just a whole bunch of different things I want to do. So I'll work on something crazy for 1 week, and then I'll be like, okay, but I won't progress, through the stages of becoming an actual expert on anything really. So yeah, it was just that kind of whole concept of just trying to do just being curious and trying to do several different things at once, and maybe becoming sort of okay at each thing. Right. So that's basically it's just giving a name to that whole like roller coaster of emotions.
Well, what kind of programs were you using to edit? Were you using Audacity, or what kind of video editor were you using?
Oh yeah, with Stranded Output, I was using Blender to edit the videos.
Really?
Which, yeah, a lot of people are kind of like, huh, what? But Blender, yeah, is actually a really good video editor as well. It is a learning curve. Like, I mean, I know Blender is quite intimidating for a lot of people, but once you kind of sit yourself down and take the time to learn it, it's actually incredibly powerful, and it's very keyboard centric. There's very little mouse involved, unless you're like moving your clips around the timelines and stuff. But the cool thing is it actually uses the exact same commands, like keyboard shortcuts and stuff, as the 3D modeling part of it. So it's really cool in that sense. So you can kind of manipulate 3D models in the exact same way you'd manipulate clips on your timeline to create a video, which is really cool. So it's a great way to actually, it's kind of like a gateway to Blender, I suppose, is just to edit videos in it. And that teaches you quite a lot about how it works. So So yeah, I found that really interesting. Because Kden Live, I tried it, but it crashed a lot. Wasn't super reliable. The theming wasn't great at the time. So I was kind of put off it. I tried like OpenShot, Shotcut. Again, same story. Not super stable, not reliable enough. I did admittedly edit a few of those videos in Windows. So purely because like video editing just wasn't there yet on Linux at the time. So I was trying really hard, and I even went as far as editing videos in Blender. Like that's how far I had to go to make sure they were edited on Linux. Because I really wanted to do that. I really wanted to create videos and create content and say, look, I made this entirely on Linux, so it can be done. Right? That's what the point I was trying to make.
Right. Well, you said it in a good way that Blender is like editing video is a gateway to the rest of the program. And I think other people have said that before, that once you start editing in Blender and you get to get the feel of it, it's just another short step to all of the rest of the application itself. So it offers a whole new world of editing more than just videos. So I think that's great.
Yeah, I mean, it fascinates me. That's why I'm so interested in Blender, because you could create some crazy things in Blender, like from end to end. Like you can create characters or environments. You can texture them. You can give them like material properties. You can create lighting. You can create cameras. You can automate your cameras. You can create basically a film in Blender if you really want to, and like without ever leaving the program. And I just find that fascinating.
Yep. Definitely a powerful program. All right. So let's get into the podcast and talk about that.
Yeah.
You're in season 4 right now, I believe.
That's right.
And I asked Connor when he was on Linux Spotlight about how it all started, but I want your perspective from the same situation. So how did you go from a Linux user to wanting to start a podcast?
So I can't take any credit for the podcast starting. That was all Connor and Mike. As you probably know, that we had actually been organizers with the Dublin Linux Group, the Dublin Lug, for quite a few months at that point, maybe a couple of years at that point. So me, Connor, and Mike kind of got to know each other through that group. We would just meet up in a pub every few weeks and do it on meetup.com. So that kind of started to gather a bit of steam, and we were getting like more and more people coming every week and having cool conversations, and people would bring their laptops, and it kind of was quite a success for and it still is, I guess. Well, obviously we can't do meetups net right now, but don't mention the war. So basically we were just in the pub, we were sitting there, and we thought, like, we could make our own podcast. Like we could just take this conversation that we're having now and record it, and people might listen to it. So that's what we wanted to capture, was that sort of community banter aspect of Linux, where you're not necessarily always talking about Linux. But that's the kind of the central theme of why you're all there. So yeah, that was kind of the idea behind the podcast and where the name came from. But it was pretty much Connor and Mike's idea. They kind of just said it to me and said, hey, we were talking in the pub the other day and we thought, hey, we could do a podcast. And I said, yeah, I'm in. Okay.
Yep. Awesome. I love it. Well, it's a podcast about Linux, open source stuff. You cover things that, you guys feel are newsworthy. You give your individual opinions on each of those things that you cover. In a recent episode, you went through not only how the podcast started, but how it's made and how it's edited. Can you kind of like replay the short version of your transformation from being new at editing and starting out and just learning things and some of the hurdles that you overcame?
Yeah. So yeah, hurdles is definitely a great word because there were a lot of them. I sound very negative when I say things like that, but yeah, no, it's all part of the process, so it's a good thing ultimately. But like, like starting out editing, I was starting from literally zero. Like some guys, they have some audio training, they might be musicians, they might have some idea of how audio is supposed to be created. I had nothing. I didn't understand one thing about audio editing or recording because I was never a musical guy. I was always more into films and visual stuff and everything. So yeah, I was struggled through it initially. Like I went through Audacity. That's what I have always used since the beginning. I'm obviously way more proficient at it now just from trial and error for the last couple of years. But yeah, at the time it was challenging, I didn't really know how to edit a podcast. I didn't know what it should sound like. I did listen to podcasts, but I didn't know how to make what I had sound like what they had. So I just didn't understand what buttons to click to make it sound good at the time. So I remember our audio quality was a big hurdle at the start. Like it took us a few months to kind of get that down, to get that a bit more clean and less crackly or with too much bass or too much treble or it was too low or too high. And we had all sorts of, challenges where audio was concerned. But it's cool because all those little challenges all those little problems you have to solve and all those little annoyances that pop up every single time that happens, you kind of learn something new. So you learn about a new feature in Audacity that helps you to get rid of, this kind of horrible noise that you need to get rid of, or maybe the voice sounds a certain way. And then you start looking at YouTube videos, how to get rid of the hiss or something in someone's voice. And then you eventually just pick up, a little toolbox of tricks and tips and everything that you can use to create what you want to create. So that was really interesting to kind of go through that. And
well, I can completely relate to learning audio and videos, especially for me, at ground zero, because I didn't know nothing about either when I started. And there are a ton of things that you have to learn, and I'm still learning. And the sound that I have on the podcast is not where I want it to be yet, but I'm learning every day. And hopefully at some point, it'll actually sound good like all the other podcasts. But hey, but I think
it sounds pretty good.
But I think the best part of Linux Lads is that it's genuine. It's you guys talking to each other and talking about your experiences. That to me is what I value the most. You can go to podcasts or videos that are, super shiny and professional and have all of, but you guys have this chemistry between you three that like I said, it's not that it's flawless chemistry. It is good chemistry between just regular guys that want to sit down about something and talk about something that they love. That's, I think, what I love about it. What do you think is the success or the reason behind the success of Linux Lads?
Wow, it's cool to hear success. I guess, like, firstly, I have to say we're all incredibly surprised that anybody listens to it. We're just, because we always kind of see ourselves as the underdogs or something. I don't know. Like, we always have this assumption that we're not good at it or something. I don't know what it is, but no. But like, yeah, that what you're talking about is very intentional. Like, yeah, as I was saying earlier. So the whole point of it is exactly what you said. It's to capture just that banter that goes on between nerds in the pub, like that's what we want to capture. Because that's goes back to something all of us feel as well, is that I know in like the US and the UK and stuff, they have a pretty healthy community around this stuff, but in Ireland not so much, because there's less people. Dublin's kind of only got about 1.5 million people, so there's always going to be the communities and the niches and stuff are always going to be a little bit smaller in that situation. So yeah, that's what we wanted to do. We wanted to be like, okay, we'll do a podcast, and we want to capture that kind of community stuff that we, isn't as easily found here. There is an Irish community for sure, like open source and Linux and stuff, but as I said, it's just not as big as it would be in other places. So yeah, that's that was very intentional to kind of capture that sort of spirit, that sort of just pub atmosphere, just like everyone just kind of, cracking jokes and, maybe using colorful language and stuff like that. So, and maybe sometimes even just veering completely off course and not even talking about Linux, like talking about something that we just tangentially got to somehow.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's, we like to let it free flow, and just, we kind of ramble sometimes and we kind of go off on weird tangents and stuff. But yeah, I think it works, and it's cool to hear someone say that, because that's kind of exactly what we're going for. So that's really cool.
Well, I think it works because it's real. I mean, if we sat down and we went to somewhere, we went and had a coffee, or we went to a pub or something like that, we would sit down, and not every single word would be about Linux. Sure, we would definitely talk about Linux, but it would just be everyday conversation. And I think that's what it captures. So, but you did False Talk Live,
Yeah.
and this was a live show where you did a live podcast. Are you crazy or something?
Yeah. Because that was crazy, because we had for those for those familiar with False Talk Live and everything, you've probably heard of Late Night Linux and Ubuntu podcast and all those guys in the UK, like Joe Ressington and stuff. So we kind of grew up on their podcasts. So that's what the podcast we would all be listening to when we were just like Linux fanboys originally. So it was a bit surreal, because we went to an event called OggCamp in the UK, and it was the first time me, Mike, and Connor all went together, and we had just started doing the podcast, and we were inspired by these other podcasts like Late Night Linux and Linux Voice and all that kind of thing. So we were like, this is crazy. Like we're just rubbing shoulders with these guys, just going to the pub, just having a chat with them. It was really cool. And the reception to our podcast was like, it was really, immediately people were like, oh, we liked it, like the audio needs a bit of work, but the whole atmosphere of the podcast is there, and we like listening to it, and we think it could be very good, and blah, blah, blah. And we were just, whoa, okay. But then I remember we were approached by Joe, and he said, if you keep going with the podcast and, you work on it a bit, you can go to False Talk Live. And we were like, hang on, what? Because Connor and Mike had gone there as just as the audience, I think the previous year. I couldn't go for some reason, but I had something else on. But so that was pretty insane that we were just the guys in the community, just listening to the podcasts that other people were making, and following the news like anyone else. And all of a sudden, this guy whose podcast we've been listening to for a good year or so says, hey, come do your podcast at the live show that you've attended in the past. I don't know, it was just crazy. So yeah, we were all a bit flabbergasted that he invited us to that. But the live show was nerve-wracking, very nerve-wracking, as you can imagine. So I think we kind of, I wouldn't say we tanked, but we didn't do half as much preparation as everyone else. So, and that was definitely mentioned afterwards, but we kind of just got up with a loose list of topics we were going to talk about. And, there were some kind of awkward silences here and there, but, we got some laughs, and people were saying they enjoyed our slot. And so, I don't know, we just said, whatever, like it is what it is. It was just a bit of fun. So, we were sort of meant to go back this year and be better prepared and have a proper thing done by, a proper show in the works. But yeah, obviously with the coronavirus and stuff, that had to be cancelled. So we're still going to do it though. We're still going to do the idea we originally had.
So going back now, do you go back with what are you excited to go back? Are you nervous to go back? Or, you got that, we got this kind of mentality?
I can't speak for the other guys, but for me, yeah, it's all positive. I mean, I'm not super nervous at all about doing that kind of stuff anymore. Because I guess I just threw myself into it, and then it was okay afterwards, and it was actually kind of fun. And it's not a huge crowd either, so it's like, I don't know, I'd say it's no more than 100 people, probably less, probably maybe 50 or 60 people. No, I'd say maybe 100, I'm not sure. But yeah, so it's not a huge crowd, so it's not as intimidating, and there aren't like spotlights on you or anything, and there's no there's no producer with a clipboard or anything, so it's not super intimidating. It's very easy to relax. It's basically just like sitting at a stool in a bar and just talking to a big group of people. So yeah, it's fine. The next time we were like, yeah, we have to prepare more, and we have to maybe put on more of a show instead of just doing a live version of an episode. So yeah, well, we knew that we would prepare for it and we would have it ready, and we were kind of excited to do it next time.
Nice. Well, there are many Linux conferences out there. There's many lugs out there. What type of atmosphere is the Dublin Linux community when it gets together? Is this like how many people show up? Like, what type of atmosphere is it?
Well, there's two different meetups we would do on a regular basis. We would have like every second week, it would alternate. So we'd have like a coffee shop meetup, and then we'd have like a pub meetup. So the reason we had that was because maybe some people like don't want to drink, or they don't like pubs or something, so they would prefer a coffee shop. And we rented this cool little room in a venue in the city, so it was really central and stuff. So that's more of a get the laptops out, bring your little project, show people what you're working on, kind of meet up. It's in a room with a table and chairs and stuff. And then the pub meetup is obviously just drink alcohol and talk about Linux and have some food. But not everyone would actually drink, obviously, but so it's not like let's go crazy kind of thing. But
right,
it's but yeah, so the atmosphere is kind of always the same. It's always just like welcoming. We don't want to scare anyone off. We want people to come back, and if somebody comes in and says, "Oh, I know absolutely nothing about Linux, I don't know what any of this is about," we're like, "Okay, great, this is for you. We want to show you." So that's where we're coming from. We don't want to scare anyone off. We don't want to throw a lot of intimidating stuff at them straight away and have them never come back. Like, we want people to be interested in it, and we want to share what we know. So so that's the kind of atmosphere we try to create, I suppose. Just being welcoming, just
right.
Hi, how are you? Why are you here? Not why are you here, but
the way it should be. The way it should be everywhere, basically.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, you're involved with Dublin Linux. You've gone to False Talk. You have a video on your YouTube channel about Belfast, I think it was. And you mentioned that you've been to Falston before. So tell us about the differences between the conferences that you have gone to, and maybe, something that you like better about one or the other.
Well, yeah, I've been to a few over the last while. There's FOSDEM. It's on every year in Brussels. Then you have OggCamp, which is in the UK usually, in a different city every year. Then you have FOSTalk Live, and you've got Belfast. That was only a once-off thing I went to. That was just kind of a very small speaker track kind of thing, a single track of speakers in Queen's University, Belfast, up north. So so that was really cool to get a train up to Belfast and stuff and see the community up there. So so that was really interesting, and of course it was in Ireland as well. So I was like, yay! But so FOSDEM is definitely more for professionals. I found it's more for guys who are in the industry. It's kind of like the central conference in Europe for open source and for Linux and stuff. So it's very interesting, and it's huge as well. Like, it's a whole university campus. They have like dozens of rooms and tracks and everything. So, and they have an exhibitor area where you get like people from really well-known projects in the open source world and the Linux world who are just be showing off their stuff. You can talk directly to developers and owners of these and maintainers and stuff. So it's super cool. Like, that's very finger on the pulse industry kind of thing.
Right.
But it's cool because you can hear announcements straight from the mouth of the developers of these projects that you love. So that's the crazy thing. Like, you can, and they do all sorts of events around it as well. So it's a big, clunky conference with lots of really interesting stuff happening, but it's a bit overwhelming. There's a lot of stuff happening there. And as well, it's incredibly crowded lately. That's why I stopped going, because I just found I for 3-4 years in a row, I would take my weekend off in January. I would fly out to Brussels. I would bring home a ton of lovely Belgian chocolate for the family. That was always my ritual every January. And I would always just go on my own and just meet people there and stuff. So this is before I kind of met Connor and Mike and got involved in the community in a big way. So that was kind of how I was able to talk to people about this stuff. I would have to fly to a different country. So, that was, I stopped going, as I said, because it just got too crazy and the crowds were nuts, and you would be queuing for like an hour to get into a room to see a talk. Right. And then you'd be queuing for so long that the room would fill up. So there was no point in you even having waited in the queue. So you wouldn't get in anyway. So yeah, I kind of stopped going because of that. But OggCamp was another one. That's in the UK. That's brilliant. We all love OggCamp because that's a bit closer to home. It's always in the UK, so the flights are super cheap. And, everyone's just kind of, the UK and the Irish community are very sort of intertwined. So, we tend to listen to all their podcasts and go to their events and stuff, because they always just tend to be happening in the UK. So really amazing to meet everybody that you're used to just talking to online or on Telegram or something. It's really nice to meet those guys in real life and see what people are working on up close. OggCamp is very community focused, much more so than FOSDEM. FOSDEM's a lot more guys who are actually working on the projects themselves. It's a bit more serious, but with OggCamp, it's just, by the fans, for the fans kind of thing. So always a great event. It's really cool as well because it's ad hoc. Like, people can just show up on the day and just put a post-it note on a whiteboard just with the name of their talk and what they want to talk about, and people can just vote on what they want to see the most. Nice. By putting dots, and then will change it to a bigger room if more people want to see it. And there's just some fascinating things come out of it, like, because people can just arrive on the day with a talk and just do it. So it's really cool in that regard. They do have a main track of speakers, but yeah, it tends to be really interesting stuff. And OggCamp, again, it's all about the Saturday night and the Friday night, and all the parties that go along with it as well.
Well, I know that you love open source, and, we had talked earlier about, using different tools, but some people only want to use free and open source software. They don't want to run anything proprietary. And others, like myself, are on the pragmatic side where, I'm going to run what is the best tool for the job, regardless of what that is. And you had mentioned earlier about, proprietary drivers and stuff. So where do you fall into that mix? Are you on that pragmatic side of using the best tool for the job?
I used to be a bit more, I used to be a bit more principled, and, I rigidly stick to the FOSS principles and everything, and, not use proprietary stuff. But then I just found, I sort of learned the hard way that it's just too difficult. You really have to be very dedicated and very want to use your computer in that way. You have to have a very strong desire to be that way, to actually commit to it, because it is difficult not to use proprietary stuff. and closed source software. Like, it's incredibly difficult to avoid. So, pragmatism has to take over. So basically, I will just say to myself, if there is an open source or Linux-based version of this, I will always default to that as much as possible, as much as is practical. So yes, the pragmatic side is definitely where I am now. It's like I need to do stuff, but I will accept some sacrifices to use a Linux-based version of something or an open source version of something. So I will accept a little bit less functionality or a little bit less polish, but there's a scale. You have to get to a point where it's like it has to be usable as well. Like, you have to be able to do something with it. So yeah, I'd be definitely on the pragmatic side.
Well, I think there's all kinds of different varying opinions on it. And, just the other day, I got questions on, actually using Zoom, because Zoom is a proprietary piece of software. But at the end of the day, as much as I want to run open source software, I still have to go with one, which is the best tool, but two, which is the best tool that gives me the most amount of time, because like we talked before, this stuff takes an enormous amount of time to do. And I can't be spending hours upon hours trying to work through some issues that maybe I wouldn't have in a different piece of software. So I definitely fall into the pragmatic side.
Yeah, I mean, you have to. Yeah, I mean, unless you're an idealist, like it's like I said, you really have to want to live your life that way.
Well, and I don't see there's anything wrong with that. There's nothing wrong with somebody. That's actually an admirable thing that they want to use only open source software. But that's not where I am at yet. So
yeah, for sure.
So there are a lot of reasons why people choose to run Linux. Open source software is one of them. Customizing Linux, which is one of the reasons why I started in Linux. I think now, today, if you ask me, the community is the best reason to run Linux. What drives your passion and your love for Linux?
I think it's I just like things to make sense in the world. So I like things. I don't know. I feel like when it comes to technology and computers, I feel like there's a lot of stuff. Like, if people knew more about how computers worked and they understood what they can do with computers, I feel like there'd be some huge changes in the world. And I think it gets into political, ideological sort of areas here, but that's how I see it. Like, it's a completely independent, democratic way to use computers. So that's basically where I'm coming from on that. Like, I just think it empowers individuals. It allows them to use their computer in a way that they choose to use it, not some company has prescribed that they have to use it. And I'm not one of these people who thinks like any company over a certain size is automatically evil. But the fact is that like a big company, like, their whole purpose is to generate a profit. So if you're selling software, there's a lot of things you can do to make sure you earn more profit, and it's normally at the expense of the user experience, and it's normally at the expense of user choice. So that's where I'm coming from on that. I just think Linux is, if you can empower someone to just buy a computer, put whatever they want to put on it and use it exactly the way they want to use it, then I don't know, it's empowering. So it's giving, you're putting the means of production in the hands of normal people. So yeah, and it demystifies computers as well, because I find that a lot of people are frightened by computers and frightened about exploring what they can do, because they think they're going to break it, or they think they're not smart enough, or they think it's way more complicated than it actually is. And I'm just like on a mission in life, I don't know, to show people this is what you can do with that blinking box in the corner. Like, you can do amazing things with this thing. So I just want to get that across.
Yep. Well, I think there are a lot of people that don't really care, and that's kind of half the battle sometimes, is to get people to see that there are other options, and hey, you can do these things. So yeah, I think there's a whole subsection of people that don't care, but for those people that do care, you're right. It is empowering to them to actually use a computer the way they want to, rather than to be told how to use it. So, all right. So what about the Linux community? We have not always been the friendliest, but in your experience, how has the Linux community treated you or the people around you?
I would say well. Yeah, I was, I've never had any bad experiences. I mean, the only bad experiences I think I've ever had have been online, and even then, I wouldn't even call them that bad. It's just the only negatives I would see would be like the kind of, a lot of people can be quite opinionated in this community, which is not, I don't think it's automatically bad to be opinionated. It's fine to have a strong opinion on something if that's what you think. But like, I think a lot of people, the perspective can't be there sometimes. So they would think, oh, well, I use this thing and it's far more efficient and far more like less resource intensive, and they're looking at it from a purely like efficiency technical standpoint, and thinking, well, this is the most efficient way to use your computer, and it's like, well, most people don't care about that. Like, that's that's what I would say. I mean, some people just want to use their computer.
Right. Well, is there anything you think that we can do better as a community to make the experience better for people?
Yeah, I would say stop looking at it as a niche interest. I would say stop looking at it as something underground, and I would say be a bit more open to making it more crowd friendly. I think there's a resistance in the community to like I have to choose my words carefully because I don't want to like poop on anyone here, but there's a resistance to change, I guess you could say.
There is.
So like, for instance, prime example, nothing to do with the actual software, but with the Dublin Linux group that we had, it was called DLUG, the Dublin Linux User Group. And I was just looking at that on meetup.com, and I was like, that's so boring. Like, that's the boring name for a group. It is. And I don't mean to be mean or anything, but it is. It's just, that doesn't resonate with most people. Linux users group. It sounds very dry, I think. And I think that kind of stuff, and like people still using mailing lists and, trying to do absolutely everything in the command line. It's like, yeah, that's really fascinating. I find it very interesting. Working that way, but it's not for me, and it's probably not going to be for most people. So I think we need to be a bit more evangelical about Linux, and sort of getting it out there, and not being afraid to push it as a commercial thing. Don't be afraid to sort of put it up on that pedestal as something that anybody can use. Like, let's take it out of the little niche, small community world. Let's introduce it to the wider world. Let's say, hey, here we go. Look at it. It's great. It runs all your games. It can do really cool things. Like, there's no more, this isn't like down in your parents' basement anymore. This is a mature, polished, like well-made piece of software that's the equal of anything you would pay for. So yeah, and that said, I paid for my current Linux distro, like Zorn OS. I bought the ultimate version. So I was happy to do that, like, even though it's open source,
Which is a good way to give back to the developers and the community itself too.
Exactly.
Well, I had a guy at work the one time I was telling him about Linux, and he said to me, "Yeah, do you still have to install it through the command line?" Like, no, you know, I mean,
Oh my.
we've come a long way since then. But you had mentioned earlier about Blender being keyboard driven. What is your daily workflow like? Are you a keyboard centric guy? Do you even have a workflow? Is it just you have a list of software that you install that you need every day?
Yeah. There are definitely go-tos that I have when I say if I transition to a new distro or something. Yeah, there are a few things I'll install straight away. Obviously Audacity for the podcast, that's essential. Firefox, I will always use Firefox web browser no matter where I am. I'll stubbornly use Firefox. Even if it's an inconvenience, like even if a work situation where like everything works best in Chrome or Edge or something, I'll be like, no, I'm using Firefox. Yeah, Firefox, obviously, I can't think of too many right now off the top of my head, but with the workflow, I mean, I've kind of stuck with GNOME based things for most of my Linux career. So I'm just used to, super key, type the name of something,
Right.
you're away. And also workspaces. I couldn't live without workspaces. I always have it. It's not the same on every single distro, but I always make sure it's mapped like Control Alt Arrow. I depend on my workspaces like crazy. So
Nice.
I just hate
Well,
screen clutter.
let me take a side route there and ask you about Firefox. Why is it that you are so into using Firefox and don't want to use another browser?
Well, the only other browsers are not made for the same reasons. So Chrome and Edge are free browsers, but they're made by companies that want to earn a profit. So I just think, why do they want to give us a free web browser if they want a company that needs to make money? So I just don't trust. I just see the browser as an extension of their marketing or something. I don't know. And there has been cases of they're collecting user data that is very, very useful and profitable to them through those browsers. So and I just like the idea behind Firefox. I just think Mozilla is a fantastic organization. Like, even if they don't always get everything right, I just think it's great that something like that exists in the world, and I want to support them. I want to contribute to their market share of browsers by just using it. Just an ethical company, they're not a not-for-profit company as well. So, and their whole aim is very aligned with my goals, to introduce fair, ethical computing to everybody,
Yeah. Very nice. Is there any software that's currently not on Linux that you would say you would want to come to Linux, or maybe be a game changer for other people if it came to Linux?
Oh yeah. I would say probably Adobe programs, because I've always been, as I said earlier, I've been fascinated by VFX and video editing and stuff. So I would like to learn how, because Adobe is pretty industry standard. So I would like to at least know my way around something like After Effects or I'm completely blanking on the video editor name, Adobe Premiere.
Premiere, yeah.
But yeah, that's something I'd like to see. I don't know. And I can't think of any, because this is the thing, like everything I want is on Linux now anyway, so there's nothing I'm personally missing. But for other people, yeah, I just say more industry standard kind of tools, like the proprietary stuff. If that had Linux versions, I could see a lot of people going straight to Linux, and games as well. The more native AAA games on Linux, the better as well.
Yep. Well, I think that's a great place to be, where you're at a place where all the software you need runs on Linux. That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So, do you believe that Linux is bad at marketing itself? We always hear about this term, "Year the Linux desktop." Is this something achievable in your mind? Is this just a meme at this point?
It's kind of a meme. Yeah. For me and the Linux lads and stuff like that, it is always a joke that we hit the, the year of insert something, is this the year of, yeah, it is a running joke for sure. Like, I'm not going to lie, but, because it's great. Like, I love that people are hopeful and they want to see Linux succeed and get widespread recognition for how great it is. But, I don't know. It's due to the community's greatest strength is also its greatest weakness, in that it's independent and not centrally governed, and anyone can do whatever they want with the code, so long as they follow a certain number of rules, etc. So it's just kind of, it's fragmented, so it's hard to get everyone pointed at one thing. That's the advantage that proprietary software has. It usually has a commercial entity behind it that is very focused on driving the software in a certain direction, so on driving the marketing in a certain direction, obviously. So with Linux, you just don't have that, because there's just a million different types of Linux and a million different projects that all contribute to it. Or Linux distros, can be maintained by like two guys in their basement or something. Like, it's just crazy. Like, there's so much fragmentation, so many people out there doing stuff, that I think it's hard to get everyone singing on the same hymn sheet. But what I'd like to see is maybe one or two projects sort of working on that, though, working on creating a product that you can just hand someone on a silver platter and say, look, here's Linux. It's easy now. It's easy to install. Like, we need to stop being resistant to it being easy. Just because something's easy, it doesn't mean it's bad. So yeah, I'd like to see that. I'd like to see, so Zorn OS is a great candidate. I see that that's their whole aim too, is to try and get people who wouldn't normally care about Linux to care about Linux, or not even to care. They don't even have to care. They just have to use it and recognize why it's better to use it than something else.
Right. Well, I think that, that brings back a point that I've asked other people about a universal distro. And I don't think that, I totally agree. I think we should have a Linux distro that we can hand to people and say, this is what Linux is, if you've never heard of it. That doesn't mean that all of the other Linux distros go away. That just means that we promote this one as if you're new to Linux, this is it. And I think that's something that we desperately need right now.
And it's tough as well, because Linux isn't just one thing. I mean, you can boot up 10 different distros, and if you choose the distros right, each one of those distros is going to look completely different to the last one, and it's going to behave in a totally different way. So just the ecosystem is so packed with different things that you can't even say that Linux is going to look like this on your screen, or it's going to be this color or this size. You can't measure it in those terms. You have to just kind of say it's whatever the hell you want it to be,
Well, it can be whatever you want it to be. Now, I've seen or heard stories in the past where people have gone into like wherever, a computer box store, and tried to install Linux on the computers there, or people on Linux Spotlight have said they have changed over university or colleges computers to Linux. Have you ever been anywhere that you wanted to convince them to run Linux?
Not in an organization, but certainly for friends and family. My mother had an old laptop. It was a really kind of terrible, like, budget laptop that she got in the electronics place. It was a display model, so it had like scratches on it and stuff, and it was the battery life wasn't good because it was just left plugged in all day and stuff like that. So it was really bad, and it had it wasn't a very powerful laptop, but it was kind of a small, kind of handy little thing that she could use just on the couch or something. So, and it was a touchscreen laptop as well, so it had a cool feature as well. So and you could fold it back, and it was a tablet then. So but it just wasn't very powerful. And Windows 10 was on this thing, like full fat Windows 10.
Oh my.
And that's another thing with proprietary stuff. Like, it never, like, you can't size it down to be on less powerful hardware with Windows. It's just gonna tax it too much. Like, it's, so I was like, I'll put Linux on this thing for you. And she was like, "Oh, will it work? You know, the touchscreen thing still work and everything?" I'm like, "Yeah, probably will still work. Yeah,
Probably.
You'll probably
Let's
have
hope.
to do less driver installation and messing about than you would with Windows most likely." So, I just put I think it was Linux Mint Cinnamon on that laptop, and because it was very visually similar to Windows, which she was used to. So, I was expecting, a torrent of questions afterwards, but a week went by. I said, "Oh, how's that laptop? Have you been using it?" And she was like, "Oh yeah, it's fine. I just turn it on, go into, I do the same thing I would do with Windows. So I just turn it on, click on the web browser, and go to Facebook or whatever game I want to
Nice.
play." So yeah, she was. That was amazing to me. That was something that hadn't occurred to me before. Was that it was so easy for her to pick up, and it was actually kind of easier to pick up than Windows. So because it was just a cleaner looking Linux Mint Cinnamon, I think it's a very sensible
Yep.
way to organize a desktop. I mean, it's almost identical to Windows. It's the paradigm that we're all used to. So there's not really any learning curve anymore. So that's the thing. I think that's the thing that people don't understand about Linux is that that learning curve is kind of gone. There's nothing to figure out. Like once you have it on your computer, it's pretty straightforward to use like anything else. So yeah.
Yep.
So with her, yeah, I was amazed at how little questions she asked, and I hadn't even considered. I thought she was going to be calling me up like 2 days later going, "Oh, this doesn't work or this broke." But no, she was fine.
That is fantastic. I love hearing stories about that because, there are so many people that, like I said, that don't even know the difference. When you hear stories like that, it makes you want to go out and tell other people about it.
Mm.
So if there was one thing that you could change about Linux, what would it be?
Well, I guess the smarty pants answer is well, whatever I want, I suppose what would I change about Linux? That's an interesting question because like as I said, you can change whatever you want if you really have the know-how, but Linux itself, I can't really think of anything. But I would change certain aspects of the community and how it's promoted and managed and stuff for sure. But then again, there's not really anyone you could point to and tell them that they need to be doing that. Like it's a fragmented community in a good way.
Yep.
There's no one person you go to and say, "Hey, you need to start doing this with Linux." Like it doesn't work that way. Yeah, I don't know. I'd like to see. I don't know if this is what you were asking, but I would like to see more mobile Linux. What I'm really waiting for, the next thing I need to see is, and I know this is out there and it's coming along, but it needs to mature a bit, is basically Linux on a tablet. So I want a full fat Linux desktop on my tablet. Because I like working on tablets. I find them very useful. So that's what I need to see. That's what I want, basically. But not an app based thing,
Right.
like an actual desktop on a tablet. I would really enjoy that. I would just find that so handy. So, but that give it a year, we'll probably have something like that. We already have like the Pine Tab, and I know KDE are doing a lot of KDE and Ubuntu as well. They're doing a lot of work in that regard.
So much innovation going on right now.
Yeah.
Man.
Oh, it's crazy. Like there's so much stuff happening recently. Like it's like the kind of fancy stuff in Linux, the shiny, cool stuff. The graph was going pretty straight for quite a few years, and then in just the last 2 or 3 years, it just went, whew, and we have lots of cool stuff just happening all at once. Like it's nuts.
We do. I agree. Well, you told us the reasons why you chose to run Linux when you started. Why are you still choosing to run Linux today?
Well, mostly because that's what I'm used to now. And I don't see any reason to go back to Windows. That's it. I'm happy with it. It does everything I need it to do. So that's why I stay with it. And also, as I said, because there's so much stuff to look forward to as well, because there's still so much stuff. It's that, you know, like stuff that only used to run on Windows or Mac is, you know, you hear of that kind of stuff coming to Linux every so often, and open source projects maturing to a level that they can actually become an alternative to their proprietary counterparts. So
yep.
You hear about those stories happening like every other week now. So I'm just waiting for all the goodies to flow in. You know, I'm happy to stay on the Linux boat and wait for all these cool programs and cool hardware support to come along. And yeah, I just see Linux as a bit of a candy store, because I just like to fiddle and tinker and mess around with stuff all the time.
It's a perfect place for that.
Yeah.
All right. Is there anything else you'd like to share with people?
What I would love actually is for people to get in touch with me, because I love hearing from people. And I'm always trying to push the community aspect, and you know, I'm on Twitter a bit. So I don't know.
What's the best way to get in touch with you?
Probably Twitter. I'm at, like, you can put my handle. It's at Shane Kitt, my full name. So 2 T's. So that's how you can get me. Because yeah, I guess my issue is like, I want to do this YouTube channel again, for instance. And I have a ton of ideas. I love to create stuff. I love to make content. So, but I just don't know what to do, you know? So I'd love for people to actually tell me, hey, I haven't seen something like this on YouTube yet. You go do it. And I'll be like, okay.
Well, I'll tell you what, the best thing is to do the content that you love to do. That's the best thing. If you are looking for people to give you advice on where to or what to do, you'll get 100 different opinions, and you may not end up with anything that you really want to do. Just do what you want to do, and you'll be fine.
Yeah, good advice for sure. Make the videos you want to watch.
That's it. That's it. All right, Shane, thank you so much for everything you do with Linux Lads, with promoting Linux in the Dublin group, in all of the conferences that we have, like OggCamp and False Talk Live. I really appreciate all of that effort that you put into it.
Thank you very much. And you too as well. Yeah, I really like the show.
All right, that's going to wrap it up. Thank you all for joining us this week as we spotlight the best thing about Linux, our community. Until next time, long live Linux.